Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my presentation on the OS testing and compatibility component implementation plan. What we're looking to do here is give a quick overview of the component, look at some of the risks of this component, and finally look at what our rollout plan is to hopefully decrease any downtime that we may have in implementing this new software upgrade. I'll get into it a little bit more in my next slides, but we've decided to upgrade from Windows XP to Windows 10. So just to give a quick introduction, um, we'll start with a quick summary of the component. So OS compatibility is one of the major concerns preventing a company from upgrading the operating systems. This plan is to mitigate the issues that arise with a large operating system rollout. So as we can tell here, as long as a company has been on Windows XP, there is a certain dependency that's come up where if they haven't upgraded, to the latest operating system in some time, then we have quite a few difficulties when we finally decide to upgrade to a newer operating system. So some of the things that we want to accomplish is files must still be able to be opened and used with the newly installed software. This one's very important as we can't lose the already established file system or company intellectual property here. Secondly, the operating system used on the hosts must be able to interact with the server and its chosen operating system. In this case, we did choose Windows 10, and the company has already upgraded to Server 2012, and we've learned that both of these operating systems are compatible with each other. Similarly, the server operating system must be able to interact with the host operating systems. And again, we've confirmed that that is the case. Finally, the hosts and server must have the proper hardware to run the operating system at an optimal speed. In one of my later slides, we'll actually go over in detail what those hardware requirements will be and where they need to be applied. Skipping over to component risks, just to go into a little bit more further detail on that. I'll just say that the following identified risks should not be business halting, but may cause some delays in complete software usability. And this is mainly an issue because of the large gap in between the operating systems that we're moving from. So the first one of note is no OS defaults will be saved when upgrading from Windows XP to Windows 10. We see that there may be some training that needs to happen here in that while Windows 10 does look similar to Windows XP and functions have some similarity, we do think that the processes that the users have gotten used to using Windows XP, they'll find that some of those things have moved around or may not even be there at all. So we'll definitely want to make sure our users are trained up on Windows 10, and with the knowledge that Windows XP, none of the defaults that they've developed over the years will no longer be usable. File backups must be manual as XP cannot be upgraded to Windows 10 seamlessly. Again, due to the large gap between Windows XP and Windows 10, there's no seamless way to really migrate all of our files and software over to the new Windows 10 install. So unfortunately, there will be a lot of manual work that will need to be done to ensure that all of the company intellectual property and file systems remain usable. Any software developed in-house may not be compatible with Windows 10 without some additional software upgrades. The good news here is my next point here, we'll discuss virtual machines slightly that can help out with that. But I'll also say that Windows 10 has a similar outlook to the previous Windows versions before So unless that software is very old, we should be in good shape in that that software can still be installed and used. Virtual machine risk will be increased due to increased hardware and software requirements. So to my previous point, if in the case that we have some software that can't be used with Windows 10, our plan is to mitigate that by installing virtual machines as needed to users that still need to use that old software. In doing that, though, a virtual machine actually uses a lot of the resources that a PC or a laptop may use for the operating system in the first place. So to combat that, we want to make sure that all of the hardware is functioning at its best, and that we have enough hardware installed, such as RAM or memory, to ensure that that virtual machine has all it needs, as well as the native operating system itself. The layout of Windows 10 is slightly different from Windows XP. As I mentioned, this may also lead to additional personnel training to ensure success. So we do know that Windows XP has a similar layout to Windows 10, but there's several different features of Windows 10 that we'll need to train the users on to ensure they know how to use them, and that anything that they've gotten used to in Windows XP, try to find something that's similar to that where they can continue their day-to-day operations. And just as a point here, we did decide to upgrade from XP to Windows 10, as Windows 8 had problems that Windows 10 eventually resolved. So OS component requirements. From a hardware perspective, there are a few things that we'll need to upgrade to ensure that this all runs smoothly once we roll out. There'll need to be a need to upgrade the hardware to ensure it continues to function with Windows 10. What this means is if we take a look at we took a look at the requirements of Windows XP as opposed to Windows 10, and from a processing perspective, it looks like the processors will be just fine to run Windows 10. One of the things that we will need to look at closer, though, is memory usage and memory capacity. In addition to that, we have driver confirmation. So we checked all of the hardware in the laptops and the personal computers, and again, it looks like they would be fine to run Windows 10. But we do need to confirm that the drivers for that hardware have at least a Windows 10 version to ensure that it continues to function. To help with this, we can use the Windows 10 compatibility report on the computers and laptops that are identical in hardware contents. Since they're identical, what that'll allow us to do is save some time in having to run this on several computers, and we can run it on one of each of the computers in the infrastructure, and find out what would be compatible and what we may need to replace. For any outdated hardware, new components will need to be purchased to continue usage. Things like network cards and hard drives, those are usually compatible for a long term. Some of the things that may not be compatible if they're old enough is things like video cards. So we'll be looking at that on a case-by-case basis once we get the compatibility reports done. And then memory upgrades may be needed to ensure that there will be enough for the OS and virtual machine respectively. We don't intend to install a virtual machine on each computer, only for the computers that actually need that older Windows XP infrastructure, if they have some software that doesn't run on Windows 10. The current memory capacity is 4 gigabytes of RAM on the computers. We suggest that we increase that to 6 gigabytes, not only to run Windows 10 better, but to also give us a little bit of extra memory on the side for when a virtual machine needs to be run. So here we have our proposed timeline for the August 28th rollout or go live. I've separated these into 3 phases. The first phase will be, basically us gathering all of the information that we'll need to perform the rollout, and any preparation that we need to do before we actually begin the installations. Secondly, we want to do any hardware upgrades that'll be needed to ensure that Windows 10 and the virtual machines run at their best. So this could include things like making sure that we have all of our drivers figured out and all of the memory that we may need. And then in phase 3, we have the actual software implementation where we'll actually be doing all of our backups and installing the actual operating systems. So starting at the August 28th, we actually want to start on that day. We intend to run the Windows compatibility to help determine hardware compatibility. Once we've run that, then we get a list of company developed applications. So the purpose of that is, in the event that the company developed applications won't run on Windows 10, then we can do a further assessment to determine how many virtual machines that we need to set up and where. Moving on to phase 2, we will perform any fixable upgrades to hosts and servers. That would include RAM, making sure that the communications between the servers and the host today exists is good to go. And then we would verify hardware functionality using XP. So after we've installed all of that RAM or any other pieces of hardware that we may need to install, we want to verify that it still works while we're still in XP. Now that may not do much for Windows 10, but we can at least verify that what we're about to do functions as is on Windows XP. Moving into phase 3, the final phase, around August 31st, we're looking to complete the OS upgrades from Windows XP to Windows 10. So at this point, we will be already doing our file backup the day after. So we want to make sure that everything is in place for that upgrade from Windows XP to Windows 10. After that's done, then we want to install the virtual machines and any secondary software that we may need, whether it was company developed or software that we had installed back in XP. So once we've done these 3 things, the last thing that we want to do there is monitor the system and capture any issues with software functionality. At this point, we have this scheduled for September 1st, so that gives us about 2 days, to capture any major issues that may have come up, in phases 1 and 2, and attempt to correct those before, September 3rd, which is the end of that week. If management gives approval, we'd like to maybe monitor that an additional week after September 3rd, but that's pending approval at the moment. So in conclusion, the benefits of the OS testing and compatibility plan, the reason why we're doing all of this, this component will ensure that the least amount of downtime and headaches from the user perspective. This is a very sensitive rollout, as the gap from XP to Windows 10 is so large. So there'll be quite a bit of training that needs to be done, from usage perspective. And there's a lot of infrastructure that we need to make sure still functions after the rollout happens. Some of the benefits that we're looking to see is that all of the files that have been created previously will still function on the updated software. All updated software will still open with the newly installed operating system, Windows 10. Minimal to no downtime between the hosts and the servers. So as you saw in my previous slide, we're hoping to have all of this connectivity between the hosts and the servers done before we even begin to either install Windows 10 or retrieve our backed up files. And then, for any software that may not work at all on Windows 10 at that point, we will have virtual machines set up for any software that's not compatible with the latest operating system. I hope you've enjoyed my presentation. If there's any questions, please feel free to reach out to our IT team and we can address those as quickly as possible.